28 years ago, an entire classroom disappeared, until one mother noticed a detail.
Hello everyone, enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
St. Michael Elementary School had only 3 classes in total, and Class 3A was the most crowded, 23 children and their homeroom teacher, Irene Nelson. It was 9:02 a.m., according to David Rogers, the school's elderly security guard. I remember it very clearly because that's exactly when I was pouring myself a cup of coffee in the guard room, said the silver-bearded man, now nearly 80, in interviews with the press. According to the investigation records, at 9:10 a.m., a girl named Mary Jane from another class was escorted to the office by her teacher to call her mother because she had a fever. As she passed by Class 3A, the little girl found it odd that the door was shut tight. Ms. Nelson's class always left the door open. That day it was completely closed, and the curtains were drawn. I thought they must have been taking a test. Mary Jane recounted she was only 7 at the time. By 10:20 a.m., the teacher of Class 2B walked by and noticed the same thing. She knocked 3 times, but there was no response. So she called Mr. David. I took the master key. But it was strange, even after unlocking the outside, the door wouldn't budge. It felt like something was blocking it from inside, David recalled. They called the principal, Mr. Alfred Morris, a strict but dedicated man. After several minutes of struggling, the 3 managed to break the small upper window and climbed into the classroom. And then, they saw nothing. No teacher. No students. No one. The desks and chairs remained intact, the books still open on the desks. Ms. Nelson's glass of water was half full, her pen still resting on a test paper. No signs of struggle. No blood. No sound. It was as if the entire class had vanished into thin air. Ms. Nelson? Kids? Is anyone here? Alfred called out, his voice trembling. No response. Only the wind whispered through the broken windowpane, carrying the chalk dust and the scent of poppies from the nearby field. The police were immediately summoned. The lead officer was Thomas Cooper, a veteran of many Springfield cases, but he'd never encountered anything this strange. We searched every corner of the school, the storage rooms, infirmary, bathrooms, even the rooftop. No one. No trace. The classroom door was locked from the inside, so no one could have come or gone, he reported at a press conference later. In the following days, the entire FBI was brought in. K-9 units, thermal scanners, even rescue teams from the city came. No one was ever found. The media exploded. Television screens flashed the class photo of the smiling children, with Ms. Nelson standing in the middle. They were only 8 or 9 years old. The people of Willow Creek, from humble farmers to the aging village priest, fell into panic. I should have kept Ellen home that day. She had a little cough but kept begging, "Mom, please, Ms. Nelson promised we'd see real butterflies today," said a grieving mother named Catherine Mason in an interview years later. St. Michael's School was shut down immediately after, but the townspeople continued gathering in the schoolyard every evening, hoping for news. They brought candles, photos of the children, and prayed without end. But a month passed. Then 2. Then a year. Nothing. No bodies. No messages. No evidence of a break-in or kidnapping. No security camera footage. The town was too poor, and the school had no recording equipment. The world eventually moved on from the strange disappearance. But Willow Creek didn't. Fear gripped every household. The families of the missing children left quietly, one by one. Only a few elderly and those with nowhere else to go remained. Local children didn't dare go outside at dusk. Adults avoided even mentioning Class 3A, as if the name itself were cursed. There were nights I heard knocking, 3 knocks, then silence, said Louisa Fisher, an old woman who lived across from the school. I peeked through the curtain and saw someone standing at the school gate. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. But when I opened the door there was no one there. No footprints, no sound. She trembled, eyes wide with fear. I believe they never left. We just can't see them. In 1998, under orders from Springfield authorities, the entire basement level of the school was sealed with cement, citing dangerous structural damage. No one was allowed down there again. An internal report signed by engineer Louis Anderson confirmed, no signs of anything unusual. The ceiling is purely for safety. However, Louis, an old acquaintance of Mr. David, once whispered in a village bar. We heard metal scraping against the walls, like something was trying to climb up, but the boss told us to keep quiet. Since then, no one dared step onto the school grounds. Moss covered the tiled roof. Damp stains marred the walls. Weeds overtook the yard. Children of later generations were strictly forbidden by their parents from going near. A black shroud hung over Willow Creek. There used to be so much laughter here, David Rogers once said, sitting on his front steps and gazing toward the old school. Now, it's just the wind and the whispers of the dead. 28 years after the disappearance, the light in house number 11 on Oak Grove Street still shines each night. The small granite house at the edge of the village, its red-tiled roof darkened by moss, its windows always ajar, and the faint scent of scented candles drifting out whenever the wind blows through. Inside lives Catherine Mason, mother of Ellen Reed, one of the 23 children who vanished in 1997. Now in her 60s, Catherine is as thin as a withered willow, her hair prematurely white, her eyes clouded from years of crying. But more haunting than all that is her gaze always distant, as if she's listening to someone calling her from the past. At dawn, before anyone else in the village wakes, she leaves her house holding a bundle of white candles and an old fabric doll, Ellen's last toy. She walks to the wall behind St. Michael's School, where a cherry tree stands dried and lifeless. She loved this spot, she murmurs, voice hazy as if speaking to herself. When she was 3, she used to run around this tree, laughing like a little sparrow. She places the candles down and lights them. The wind sways the flames, but they don't go out. A middle-aged man approaches, carrying a basket of oranges. It's Stephen Larson, a neighbor who lives 4 houses down. Catherine, still lighting candles, he asks gently. She doesn't look at him. I heard her last night, she whispers. She was crying, calling me, Mommy, Mommy, I'm so cold. Stephen bites his lip and shakes his head. You can't keep doing this forever. It's been 28 years, Catherine. Ellen, we have to accept the truth. Catherine turns to him, eyes wide, pupils quivering. What truth? Do you have her body? Have you seen her grave? No. Then don't ask me to let go. Stephen sighs. I just worry you won't survive if you keep holding on to this pain. Catherine doesn't reply. She stands still for a moment, then heads back, still clutching the doll tightly. Her house feels like a living graveyard. The walls are covered with photos of Ellen from infancy to her first day of school. Below each photo is a candle and a small note that reads, Mommy is still looking for you. Ellen's bedroom remains untouched. The bedding is washed weekly, stuffed animals arranged neatly, her paperback storybooks kept in order exactly as they were in 1997. Friends and relatives had urged her to move, sell the house, start a new life. But she refused. If I leave, my daughter won't know how to find her way back. Her husband, Julian Reed, left in 2002. I couldn't take it anymore. She lived in the past, talked to ghosts, he said in an interview. After Julian left, Catherine lived alone. No children. No friends. No joy. Only obsession. In 2004, she was diagnosed with severe depression and auditory hallucinations. Doctors recommended psychiatric hospitalization, but she escaped after just 3 days. I'm not crazy. I'm just a mother, she told a nurse before leaving the facility. And so it went, day after day, month after month. Once, a church volunteer named Martha Allen came to visit. "Mrs. Catherine, I brought some food and toast. Would you like me to help clean the house?" she said, placing a basket on the table. "Don't touch her room," Catherine snapped, her voice sharp as a blade. "I just wanted to help." "Do you have children?" "Not yet." "Then you don't understand. Don't help me unless you can bring my daughter back." Martha fell silent. After a moment, she asked quietly, "Have you thought about finding the other parents? Maybe someone else hasn't given up." Catherine froze. She had never considered that. Since the incident, most of the victims' families had moved away, changed phone numbers, changed names, gone into hiding. "All I have is the class photo," she said, gazing at the framed picture on the wall. "The children have grown up in my imagination, but I haven't. I'm still the mother from 1997. Some nights, people saw her standing in the old schoolyard under the moonlight, calling out the names of each child. Vincent. Lucy. Samuel. Henry, can you hear me? Your mothers are still looking." A local man, Peter Grayson, once called the police, thinking she had lost her mind. When they arrived, Catherine simply smiled faintly and said, "If I'm mad, it's only because none of you believe." Despite being shunned and ridiculed as the crazy old woman from the school, Catherine remained unshaken. "The cruelty of others is nothing compared to the pain of losing a child," she once told a reporter in a rare interview. One day, Mr. Stevens stopped by again, this time carrying an old guitar. "I found this in the storage room. It's the one Ellen used to learn on. Remember?" he asked, setting the guitar on the table. Catherine stared at it for a long time, then broke into tears. For the first time in years, her tears weren't from pain but from remembrance. She sang terribly, but when she laughed, it was beautiful, her voice trembled. Mr. Stevens sat down and plucked a few notes. The sound echoed through the house like a voice from another time. "Do you think, maybe one day, we'll find a new clue?" he asked. Catherine looked out the window. "I don't need evidence anymore. Just a sound, a look, a scent that tells me Ellen still exists, and I'll follow it to the end." On a rainy April afternoon, Catherine pulled an old trunk from beneath her bed. It was an oak chest her mother had once used to store wedding keepsakes. The exterior was coated with pale green moss, the latch rusted but still sturdy. She had to tap it gently with a hammer to get it open. Inside were forgotten memories, a wool sweater Ellen wore when she was 4, a notebook filled with lullabies, and a crumpled tissue with a rushed note scribbled on it, "Mom, I got a 10 today." The handwriting neat and innocent, causing Catherine's hand to tremble as she touched it. At the bottom of the trunk, she found a thick yellow envelope. On the outside, the words, "Class 3A 1997, were smudged with ink. Inside were classroom photos Ms. Nelson had sent to families at the beginning of the school year. There were 4 photos in total, 3 taken in the schoolyard, 1 inside the classroom. It was the 4th photo that made Catherine freeze. "This isn't right," she whispered. The class photo showed the students standing in 3 rows, Ms. Nelson in the middle, smiling. Ellen stood in the front row, holding a paper flower. But at the far left, there was a strange child, with long black hair, wearing a different colored uniform, standing slightly turned away, head tilted downward. "Who's that?" Catherine frowned, holding the photo closer to her face. Even in the dim light, she could see the face was blurry as if smudged by rain or deliberately obscured. She stood up suddenly and grabbed a magnifying glass. The child wasn't smiling, wasn't looking at the camera, the eyes glanced downward with an unsettling sharpness. Most notably, the uniform was ash gray, completely different from the white shirts and blue skirts worn by the others. "No, this can't be," she muttered. She rushed to Stephen's house. "Stephen! Open the door," she pounded on the wooden frame. Stephen opened it, still holding a dish towel. "What is it, Catherine? What's wrong? Look. Look at this photo," she held it up to his face. He squinted, surprised. That's the class photo, isn't it? Look at the far left. Do you see that child? Stephen leaned in, silent for several seconds. Yeah, weird. I don't remember any kid like that in Ellen's class. Exactly. Me neither. But it's right here in the photo Ms. Nelson sent. Who is that? Stephen furrowed his brow. Maybe it was a new student who joined for the photo? No. I asked around. Ellen's class had no new students. And more importantly, no one else wore a gray uniform. Silence fell between them. The air felt heavy. Could be a lighting issue, a camera glitch. Stephen offered weakly. Catherine snatched the photo back. No. I'll ask someone else. She began going door to door, visiting the few remaining families in the village who once had children in Ellen's class. The first house she visited was Teresa Andrews Henry's mother. Teresa. You remember class 3A, right? Catherine asked as soon as the door opened. Teresa hesitated. I don't want to remember any of that. Just one question. Look at this photo. What do you see? Teresa took the picture and glanced over it. When her eyes stopped at the child on the left, her face turned pale. That's not Henry. Or Lucy. Or James. Do you remember anyone in Ellen's class wearing a gray uniform? Teresa shook her head, her voice dropping low. There was no one like that. Catherine stayed quiet. Then she asked, did Henry ever say anything strange the week before the children disappeared? Teresa paused. One day Henry came home and said there was a new friend who stood at the back of the class. Never spoke. Said the kid never blinked. Catherine shivered. I thought it was just a child's imagination. And, well, the next day it all happened. Catherine walked out, heart pounding. On her way home, she passed the old bar where Matthew Foster, the former school electrician, sat alone, sipping brandy. Matthew. I need to ask you something, she said, taking a seat. What is it, Catherine? You used to inspect the electrical system at St. Michael's. Did you ever see a child who didn't look like they belonged? Matthew tilted his head back and took a sip, then sighed softly. When I was fixing the circuit breaker in the basement, I saw a kid in an ash-gray uniform standing at the end of the hallway. Thought maybe it was someone's kid who wandered in. But, when I looked closer, it had no shadow. Catherine's mouth fell open. Why didn't you say anything? Who would believe me? They'd say I was drunk. So I stayed quiet. She clutched the photo tighter, her face flushed. There had been someone unknown, there from the very beginning. And no one had dared to speak. That night, at home, Catherine laid all the photos on the table. With a red pen, she circled the blurry face. Then she cut out that section, glued it to a blank sheet of paper, and wrote beneath it, "Who are you?" She taped it to the wall, right in the center of the living room. The wind chime outside suddenly rang, even though the windows were shut. She turned, eyes fixed. On the wall, the candlelight flickered. The small cutout photo trembled even though there was no breeze. Catherine stepped closer. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. You were there from the beginning. It was you. In the distance, footsteps echoed on the porch. Someone knocked on the door 3 times. Knock. 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 She stood frozen. No one ever knocked at her door this late. No neighbor would come at midnight. She walked slowly toward the door, her heart almost stopping. She peeked through the peephole. No one was there. Is someone out there? She called. Silence. Then, a child's voice whispered from behind her. Mom. She whipped around in shock. No one was there. Only the wind rustled through, making the chimes jingle, and the candlelight danced across the torn photograph. 3 days after discovering the strange child in the photo, Catherine began a journey to find the one person who might know the truth, Mr. Alfred Morris, the former principal of St. Michael's Elementary, the first to step into the empty classroom in 1997. According to Stephen, after suffering a stroke a few years prior, Alfred had become partially paralyzed and now lived in the St. Clair nursing home, about 30 kilometers from Willow Creek, near Springfield. That afternoon, the sky was leaden gray, and a misty rain speckled the bus window. Catherine clutched the envelope containing the photo, eyes fixed on the scenery outside. The nurse at the reception desk eyed her warily when she arrived. "Excuse me, I'd like to see Mr. Alfred Morris." "Are you family?" the young nurse asked. "No. I'm a former parent from St. Michael's School." The nurse frowned slightly. "He doesn't talk much anymore. Half his body is paralyzed, and his memory comes and goes. But if you'd like, I can take you up. Room 304. The air was dim and sterile, the scent of antiseptic mixed with the faint hum of a ceiling fan. Alfred lay motionless on the bed, his blank eyes staring up at the ceiling. One side of his face sagged, and his mouth moved slightly, but no words came out. "Mr. Alfred," Catherine called softly, her hand tightening around the envelope in her pocket. No reaction. She stepped closer and gently rested her hand on the side rail. "I'm Catherine Mason. My daughter, Ellen Reed, was in Class 3A in 1997. A blink. Catherine pulled out the class photo, unfolded it, and pointed at the circled child. "Look. Who is this?" Alfred's eyes began blinking rapidly. His working hand twitched slightly. Catherine leaned in. "You know, don't you? That child wasn't a student. You've seen him before." Alfred's eyes widened. His pupils dilated. His whole body trembled. "No," he whispered. "He doesn't age." Catherine shivered. "What? Who are you talking about? Who doesn't age?" The nurse heard the raised voice and hurried in. "Ma'am, please don't stress him. He can't handle agitation. Please. He's about to say something important." Catherine begged. Alfred clutched the edge of the bedsheet, his voice rasping, "New teacher, the basement." "What teacher?" Catherine pushed. "Which basement? Do you mean Raymond Olson?" Alfred's eyes lost focus. "He wasn't in the records." Then his body started to convulse violently. The heart monitor beeped erratically. The nurse shouted, "Call the doctor. Now." Catherine was pulled from the room, but she kept screaming, "Say it. Who is he? What did he do to the children?" Doctors and 2 assistants rushed in and wheeled the bed toward the emergency room. Catherine stood frozen in the hallway, panting. A moment later, the nurse returned, pale-faced. "He just had a heart attack. He's stable now, but no more visits." Catherine held her head, gasping. Alfred's words echoed in her mind like whispers from an abyss. "He doesn't age, the basement, not in the records." On the way home, darkness fell. Catherine sat alone on the bus, gripping the photo tightly. The keywords circled in her mind like a maze of blood. When the bus arrived at Willow Creek, heavy rain had begun to fall. She ran home, drenched, the dim yellow streetlights unable to chase away the storm brewing inside her. She pulled out an old notebook and scribbled. "Raymond Olson. Not in the records. Sealed basement. Doesn't age. Child in gray uniform." She underlined each line, eyes glued to the page. That night, as she lay in the dark, a whisper brushed her ear. "Mom." Catherine bolted upright, flipping on the light. No one there. Only her own shadow, trembling on the wall. The next morning, she went to find Mr. Charles Ingram, who had been the school secretary at St. Michael's in 1997, and now worked as an accountant at the village hardware store. "Charles, I need to ask you about something from the past," Catherine said as he checked the ledgers. "What is it?" "I'm busy. The substitute teacher in 1997. The week the kids disappeared. Was it Raymond Olson?" Charles froze. That name, no one's mentioned it in years. "Do you still have his file?" Charles shook his head. "No. He taught for just 1 week. No photo. No address. The paperwork, it was shady. I remember the principal said, 'Let him teach a few days, it'll be fine.' And then he vanished with 23 children," Catherine finished, her voice icy. Charles swallowed. "I'm not sure. But after it all happened, his file disappeared from every registry. Like he never existed." Catherine nodded slowly. The puzzle was jagged, distorted, but it was starting to take shape. "When you looked at him, did you notice anything strange?" Charles fell silent for a while. Then he said. "His eyes, they were entirely black. No whites. Always wore gloves, even when it was hot. And, one day I saw him standing at the end of the hallway, in the shadows, just staring at the kids without blinking." Catherine shuddered. A chill ran down her spine. She returned home and added another line to her notebook. "Raymond Olson is not human." The words felt etched into the page in blood. She knew, from this moment forward, she wasn't just looking for her daughter, she was digging into a nightmare that someone had tried very hard to bury. That night, under the faint glow of the moon, a small truck pulled up behind the back gate. Louis stepped out, dressed in old work clothes, holding a concrete drill. "Here," Catherine pointed, her eyes locked onto the sealed cement. Louis shined his flashlight along the ground and tapped lightly. "It's been over 25 years, but the structure's still intact. It'll take at least an hour to drill big enough for someone to get through." Catherine stared at him. "You just need to make a hole big enough for a flashlight. I need to see what's down there." Louis glanced around, sighed, and began to drill. The shrill sound echoed across the abandoned schoolyard. 30 minutes later, the concrete had a small hole about 15 centimeters wide. Louis aimed the flashlight downward and frowned. "There's a staircase. Still intact." Catherine took the flashlight and shined it deep into the opening. A cold gust of air rushed up to her face, the scent of old disinfectant mixed with metal and mildew. She inhaled deeply, leaned closer, and listened. No sound. But something made the hair on her neck stand. Louis pulled her back. "That's enough. I'm sealing it back up. This needs to end here." Catherine grabbed his arm. "Do you remember the day of the construction?" Louis didn't respond. She looked him in the eyes. "You heard something." Louis swallowed. "I heard knocking. From below. Like metal hitting the wall. 3 knocks, then silence. At first, I thought it was a pipe. But no. Once. I put my ear to the wall, and I heard someone breathing." Catherine trembled. "And you still sealed it?" "We were ordered to. Some people came from Springfield. No uniforms, but they had documents from the Department of Education. They told us not to ask questions." "Do you remember any of their names?" Louis thought for a moment. There was one guy named Mark Gordon. Seemed like the leader. Pale face, very soft voice. Eyes always looking down at the ground. Catherine wrote the name in her notebook. Then she knelt down and pressed her ear to the drilled hole. A moment of silence. Then. Knock. 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 3 dry, chilling knocks. Catherine jerked back, heart pounding. Louis went pale and dropped the flashlight. "No, no, that's impossible." She grabbed his arm. "You heard it too, didn't you?" There's someone down there. Louis shook his head violently. No, no, I want nothing to do with this. You're insane, Catherine. Really insane. He packed up in a panic, leaving the open hole behind, jumped in his truck, and sped off into the night. Catherine stood there, gasping for breath. The wind picked up. The gate creaked loudly. Is someone down there? She called into the hole. No response. Only the sound of a long, quiet exhale like someone breathing right next to her ear from the depths below. The next morning, Catherine went to the Springfield City Records office, which archived old personnel files and construction documents. The clerk on duty was Lydia Reynolds, a woman in her 50s with thick glasses and a soft voice. What records are you looking for? A substitute teacher at St. Michael's Elementary in 1997. Name, Raymond Olson. Lydia typed into the computer. Do you know what month? May. The first week. Lydia searched for a while, then frowned. There's no one by that name listed among the temporary faculty for that year. Catherine clenched her bag strap. What about freelance staff? Backup lists? Is he on those? Lydia checked again. No. I'll look through the handwritten logbooks from the principal that year if he submitted a hard copy. 15 minutes later, Lydia returned holding a thick leather-bound ledger. This is a replica of Alfred Morris's administrative journal. He submitted it in June 1997. Catherine flipped through the pages. On May 3, there was a faint ink line. Temporarily assigned substitute math teacher for Class 3A, R, is. Incomplete documentation. Incomplete documentation, Catherine whispered. Lydia leaned over. Is something wrong? Catherine closed the book. I see, someone who never should have been allowed near children entered that classroom. And now, I need to find out who he really was. That night, at home, Catherine opened her old laptop. She typed. Mark Gordon, Springfield Department of Education 1997. No results. She added the keywords, Mark Gordon missing. One single result appeared: an old news article from 2001 reporting a man named Mark Gordon who vanished mysteriously in a forest near Asheville. No trace was ever found. The attached photo showed a middle-aged man, staring directly into the camera, but there was something disturbingly hollow in his eyes. Catherine zoomed in. A deep unease crept up her spine. His eyes had no light. She closed the laptop and turned to look at the class photo on her wall, the child in the gray uniform, that twisted smile, that blurred face. They looked alike. It couldn't be. But it also couldn't be denied. One early June night, under a sliver of moon in a gray sky, Catherine stood at the gate of St. Michael's with a small backpack. Inside, a flashlight, a folding knife, a water bottle, and Ellen's old pink hair clip. Beside her stood Ralph Mitchell, an old high school friend, now a builder who specialized in concrete drilling. He was the only person she dared to trust. You're really not crazy? Ralph whispered, glancing around. You're seriously going into a sealed-off basement that's been shut for nearly 30 years? What if it's just a giant rat nest down there? Ralph. Ellen is down there, Catherine replied, her eyes sharp and unwavering in the dark. If it were your daughter, would you just stand by? Ralph exhaled heavily. I'm giving you 2 hours. After that, I'm out. That's all I need. They snuck into the school through the back gate. Darkness swallowed the schoolyard. Only the dim beam of their flashlight guided them back to the basement where Ralph had once helped Catherine drill a small hole. Ralph opened his tool bag and pulled out a heavy-duty drill. He started widening the old hole. Step back. I need this big enough for a full-grown adult, he said. After nearly an hour of dust, noise, and vibration, a large opening finally emerged. Ralph aimed the flashlight down into the basement. Stone steps, coated in dust and spider webs, led into a narrow, pitch-black hallway. "Well, looks like hell itself," he muttered. Catherine had already tied a rope around her waist. "I'm going first. Hold the rope. If I scream, pull me up immediately." "You're completely nuts," Ralph muttered. "But fine. I've got you." Catherine grabbed the flashlight, took a deep breath, and slowly descended. The air in the basement was bone-chilling. Her footsteps echoed off the stone walls like someone else was walking alongside her in the dark. She shone her flashlight down the corridor, narrow, claustrophobic, lined with old wooden doors, all tightly shut. Each door had a small square window at the top, like the kind used in psychiatric wards. She approached one and pressed her ear against it. Silence. Then, a faint wheezing like someone struggling to breathe. "Is someone in there?" she whispered. No reply. She moved on. Her flashlight illuminated scratch marks along the wall, long, deep gouges coated in gray dust and dried blood. Broken fingernails were embedded in the grooves. Her hands trembled. At the third intersection, she saw a small object on the ground. She bent down. It was a pink hair clip, broken on one side. "Ellen," she whispered, her voice cracking. She slipped it into her pocket, her hand clenching tightly around it. Suddenly, from the far end of the hallway, there were soft, barely audible footsteps. Catherine froze. She swept her flashlight quickly. Nothing. Then came a faint, high-pitched laugh, like that of a child, or a madman. "Who's there?" she shouted. "Show yourself." No answer. Only a shadow, gliding in the distance, like wind. She began to retreat. But just as she neared the staircase, the iron door above slammed shut. "Ralph! Ralph!" she yelled, pounding her fists against the metal. No response. No pull on the rope. She aimed her flashlight upward, but all she saw was a thick sheet of metal sliding back into place like an automated mechanism. "This can't be. Ralph! Please!" A sound behind her made her spin around instantly. A tall, thin figure stood at the far end of the hallway. No flashlight. No movement. Just watching. Catherine aimed her beam at him, but the light wouldn't reach his face. As if his face didn't exist in the light. "Who are you? Who are you?" she screamed. The figure slowly raised one hand, and pointed to a door on the left. Catherine stepped back. But then, curiosity or desperation pulled her forward. Her hands trembled as she turned the handle. The door creaked open. Inside was a narrow, damp room, just a table, a chair, and a sink with dried blood. On the wall were hundreds of crudely drawn children's faces in charcoal, no eyes, no mouths. Below them, scrawled in rough handwriting, "Mr. Raymond always listens." Catherine couldn't breathe. She turned. The figure was gone. Footsteps now echoed much closer. Behind her. She spun, and there he was. A tall man with long hair, dressed in an old gray vest. His skin was deathly pale, like plaster. His eyes had no whites, only solid, empty black. "You're late," he said, voice like wind slipping through a crack in a door. Catherine backed away. "Are you Raymond Olsen?" He smiled, a horrible, twisted smile. "I am, the memory no one wants to remember." He stepped forward. Catherine drew her folding knife, her hands shaking. "Don't come closer. I'm warning you. We kept the children, in your imagination," he said, stepping closer. "But you wanted to bring them into the light. The light will blind them." She screamed and lunged with the knife, but the blade passed through thin air. He vanished, like a ghost. Laughter echoed down the corridor, then silence. Catherine turned and ran. Her flashlight flickered wildly as she fled. When she reached the stairwell, she saw the rope had fallen, and the exit above was wide open. Ralph's frantic voice echoed from above. "Catherine! Jesus! Where were you? I heard noises, then the rope was yanked. She gasped. Pull me up. Now. Ralph hauled the rope, his hands trembling. When Catherine emerged at the surface, she collapsed on the ground, soaked in cold sweat, face pale as death. Ralph helped her up. What the hell happened down there? She didn't answer. Instead, she opened her coat pocket and handed him the hair clip. It's my daughter's. He looked at it. You're sure? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. We have to go back. But not tonight. Ralph looked down into the basement. God damn. Catherine lifted her head, eyes burning. I've seen hell. And inside, the children are still there. The next morning, Catherine went to the Springfield police station, carrying the hair clip, the photo from the basement wall, and a voice recording of the 3 knocks she had managed to capture on her phone while down there. The officer on duty was John Turner, about 40 years old, tall and stern, his face cold and unreadable. Ma'am, what would you like to report? He asked, his tone as flat as a form letter. I entered the sealed basement of St. Michael's School. I have an audio recording, a personal item belonging to my daughter. She went missing in 1997. John stared at her. What basement? That school's been closed and legally sealed for almost 30 years. That's exactly why I investigated. The basement was cemented over. I hired someone to drill it open. I found this. She held up the hair clip, now inside a plastic evidence bag. It belonged to my daughter, Ellen Reed. John took it and examined it. There's no way to confirm this is your daughter's. There is. I have photos of her wearing it the day she disappeared. And I can provide DNA, if needed. The physical evidence is weak. You entered a sealed property without a warrant. That's trespassing. Catherine stared at him. You're saying I broke the law by trying to find my kidnapped daughter? John sighed. I understand your grief, but the St. Michael case was closed a long time ago. Those files are no longer active, and there's no new evidence of a crime. Can you hear what's in this recording? She said, holding up her phone and playing the file. The cold, metallic knock, knock, knock echoed from the basement recording. John frowned but maintained a disinterested face. Could be pipes. Or rats. Don't play stupid with me, Catherine growled. Do you have kids, Officer Turner? You need to leave now. I'll be filing a report for unlawful entry. You'll need a lawyer. Shoot me then, she screamed. Or lock me up. As long as you go down there and look at the truth. At that moment, a younger officer entered the room, disheveled brown hair, coffee in hand. He paused when he saw Catherine yelling. What's going on? He asked. She's being disruptive. Refusing to cooperate, John replied icily. The newcomer studied Catherine for a second, then walked closer. Sorry, I'm Daniel Adams, newly transferred from Concord. You mentioned something about the basement at St. Michael's. Catherine, panting, looked at him with a flicker of hope. I found proof that my daughter Ellen was down there. Along with 22 other children. They were taken. Held. I don't know by who, but someone is hiding it. Daniel's face changed. He frowned. I grew up near there. I remember that case. My mom used to tell stories about it like folklore. She once said she saw the man with no shadow standing on the school roof. Catherine stared at him. You believe me? Daniel nodded slowly. There's no smoke without fire. Let me talk to my superiors, see if I can get a team down there. But you need to leave the station for now. I'll call you if anything comes up. John crossed his arms and shook his head. Don't cause trouble, Daniel. Catherine looked at John one last time, then turned away, her chest tight with fury. Outside, she stood under the light drizzle, cold wind cutting through her coat. No one would help her. No one dared. Except for one young officer whose eyes still held the capacity for fear. That night, back at home, she tried calling Ralph but her phone had no signal. After 3 failed calls, she sent a message. "Ralph, I need to talk. Call me." No reply. Half an hour later, her phone rang but it wasn't Ralph. An unknown number flashed on the screen. She hesitated, then picked up. "Hello." A raspy voice came through, neither male nor female. "You're digging too deep, Catherine. Who are you? There are things better left undisturbed. We know you went down there. We know the name of the man who was with you. Ralph? What did you do to him?" "He slipped. He's in the hospital." Catherine felt her heart seize. "If you keep going, you won't want to see what comes next." Then the line went dead. She tried to call back, nothing. Without hesitation, she rushed to Springfield Provincial Hospital. After nearly an hour, she found Ralph Mitchell's name on the emergency admission list. She knocked on the hospital room door. A middle-aged woman with her hair tied up opened it. "Christine, Ralph's wife." "Catherine?" she said, surprised. I heard Ralph had an accident." Christine's eyes were red. She pulled Catherine inside. Ralph lay in the bed, head bandaged, left arm in a cast, face bruised and swollen. "He fell from the attic ladder," Christine said, choking on her words. "The roofers were redoing the rafters, but the scaffold shifted. He said, it felt like someone pushed him." Catherine gripped Ralph's hand. "Can you hear me?" Ralph opened his eyes slightly. His voice was faint. "It knew I went down there, it followed me home." Christine looked at them both, terrified. "What is going on?" Catherine stood up, her eyes cold. "I have to end this. Before more people get hurt." Back at home, she unlocked the door and froze. A black sheet of paper sat on the dining table. No envelope. No return address. On the paper was a single sentence. "They're still alive. But you won't want to see them." The letter reeked of antiseptic. Below the text was a small handprint in dried blood. A child's hand. Catherine stepped back, heart racing. Her hand closed tightly around Ellen's hair clip. "They're still alive. Not corpses. Not ghosts. Children still alive, somewhere in the dark. And the one holding them, Raymond Olsen, or whatever had taken his form, still existed." She walked to the wall and stared at the class photo, her eyes locked on the child in the gray uniform. "Who are you? Where did you come from?" Wind hissed through the cracked window, making the photo flutter. A child's voice whispered. "Mom." Catherine closed her eyes, tears streaming down. "Where are you? Ellen?" And in the shadows behind her, a figure drifted silently, as fleeting as the last breath of hope. 3 days after receiving the anonymous letter with a child's bloody handprint, Catherine returned to the Springfield police station. Her face was pale, but her eyes blazed with fire. In front of her stood Daniel Adams, the only officer who had ever believed her. "You promised to help me," Catherine said, placing the letter on his desk. "Now it's time to keep that promise." Daniel picked up the paper, frowning. "This smell, it's like an old infirmary. It's antiseptic. And that's human blood. I want it tested. What do you think will happen if this goes public?" "Hope," Catherine whispered. "And if I'm wrong, I'll take responsibility. But if I'm right, then 23 lives need saving." Daniel stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. I'll escalate this. But it may take a few days to get approval." "No. You have to act now. Every minute down there, another child is being destroyed." 24 hours later, a specialized FBI rescue unit was dispatched to Willow Creek. 7 agents in forest green uniforms arrived, equipped with concrete cutters, gas masks, and earpiece communication devices. Daniel led the team. Catherine followed closely behind. St. Michael's School was now surrounded by barriers. The iron gate was fully opened, and floodlights illuminated the crumbling courtyard. An older officer, Salt and Pepper Beard, approached Catherine. "I'm Captain Sebastian Miller, head of the task force. Ms. Mason, I'm told you discovered the entrance to the basement." "Yes," Catherine replied. "And I'm not leaving until I know what's down there. We'll ensure everyone's safety. If what you say is true, we'll need doctors, psychologists, and justice." At exactly 11:03 a.m., the cement seal over the basement was broken. A gaping black void opened up, releasing a wave of rot and stale antiseptic. Toxic gases could have built up down there, a technician warned. Charles, one of the agents, strapped on his mask and turned on his helmet light. He was the first to descend. Catherine stood at the edge, holding the rope, whispering, "Ellen. Mommy's here." Over the radio, Charles's voice crackled. "Stairs are intact. I'm entering the corridor." The rest of the unit followed in single file. "There are several small rooms, looks like an old medical wing or holding cells." Another voice broke in. "There's movement. I hear breathing." Catherine held her breath. A minute later, Charles's voice returned, trembling. "We found a survivor. Female. About 30. Emaciated. Eyes are blank. She's curled in the corner." Captain Miller shouted into the radio. "Deploy medics. Get a stretcher down. Increase lighting immediately." The team split into 3 groups, opening each room one by one. Moans, sobs, and broken cries, names whispered from the shadows began echoing through the corridors. 12 minutes later, the first person was brought up. A gaunt man, disheveled, about 31 years old, dressed in tattered clothing, eyes hollow. He spoke only one phrase, over and over. "Mr. Raymond. Mr. Raymond." The second person was a young woman, her face twisted in fear, clutching a decayed stuffed bear. Every time someone touched her, she screamed, "No. Don't inject me. No more shots." Charles walked over to Catherine. "They're not recent victims," he said, his voice trembling. "Do you realize who they are?" "Students of Class 3A, Catherine whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "That's impossible, they should be over 30 by now. But their minds are still 8 years old." A nearby officer shouted, "2 more found alive. In the last room at the end of the corridor. Signs of repeated injections." More than 20 individuals were pulled out, all of them were the children who had gone missing in 1997. They were gaunt, dissociated, their eyes hollow like specters. Each one repeated a single name. "Raymond. Raymond. Mr. Raymond." That night, Willow Creek came alive. Media swarmed in, ambulances lined up. Each survivor was taken to a specialized psychiatric recovery center in Springfield. Dr. Natalie Rivers, a neurologist, stood before the press at an emergency briefing. "We conducted expedited DNA testing. Every individual matches the files of the missing children from 28 years ago. None of them exhibit normal cognitive aging. Their neural structures show damage from long-term suppression of brain maturation." A reporter asked, "Doctor, are you saying they were kept as children for nearly 3 decades?" She nodded. "They were controlled to remain permanently in the mind of a child, unaware of time, unable to resist, incapable of developing identity. It's one of the most brutal forms of captivity imaginable." Another journalist asked, "Did any of them remember who did this?" "There's one detail all of them repeated during episodes of panic: Mr. Raymond, the white room, the lullaby voice." Catherine was brought into a specialized medical room. Lying on the bed was a frail young woman with curly hair and foggy eyes, a face so familiar it stole her breath. "Ellen," Catherine called. The girl frowned. "Mom." Catherine rushed to her, embracing her tightly. "It's me, sweetheart. I never stopped looking for you." Ellen burst into tears. "I was so scared. I don't know how long it's been. What did they do to you?" Ellen trembled. "Injections, every week. If we fought back, no food. He always wore white. He sang, 'Go to sleep, little one, sleep now, mommy is gone.'" Catherine held her tighter, her tears mixing with sweat. "No. I never left you. I'm here now. You're safe." At that moment, Charles received a classified report from the National Data Center. He read it aloud to Captain Sebastian. A man named Frederick Ross was once a licensed psychiatrist who had his credentials revoked in 1989 for unethical practices. Disappeared in 1991. Sebastian frowned. How's he connected to this? Charles turned the screen. Frederick Ross is the real identity behind the alias Raymond Olson. He used growth hormones to maintain a youthful appearance, lived under false identities for decades, infiltrating schools as a substitute teacher. And at St. Michael, Sebastian said grimly, he abducted 23 children, to perform live neurological experiments. Charles nodded. By keeping their minds in a permanent juvenile state, he believed he could create a generation of perfect humans, no rebellion, no free thought, only obedience. Sebastian growled, "We need to find him. And this time, he doesn't walk away." 1 week after the shocking rescue in Willow Creek, the entire United States was shaken by the evidence and testimonies from survivors discovered in the sealed basement. Headlines spread from the New York Times to the Washington Post. 23 missing children found alive after 28 years in underground hell. At Springfield HQ, Charles stood before a map, holding a newly decrypted file. Beside him were Captain Sebastian and high-level fugitive investigator Anna Sanders, expert in tracking identity-shifting criminals. There, Anna pointed to a photo. Frederick Ross is now approximately 65. Former psychiatrist from Albany. License revoked in 1989 for administering drugs to minors without parental consent. Sebastian gritted his teeth. "And then he disappeared?" "Correct," Anna nodded. "We tracked him using at least 6 aliases. Raymond Olson was just one. He worked as a temp teacher in 5 other regions before choosing Willow Creek." Charles frowned. How did he bypass the National Education Identity System? Because he had backing, Anna replied coldly. An underground group that specializes in forging identities and creating fake personnel records for fugitives. According to Intel, his current location is. She pulled up a map showing a remote cabin in the woods outside Albany, rented under the name Frank Nelson, Ross's latest alias. "We're moving in," Sebastian ordered. "Assemble the tactical arrest team." At 6:22 a.m. the next day, a fully armed tactical team surrounded the secluded log cabin deep within the pine forest. Charles led the raid, weapon ready, gas mask on. "Frank Nelson. Open the door immediately," he shouted, his voice echoing off the hills. No response. After 10 seconds, they breached the door with a battering ram. Inside, it was pitch black, reeking of chemicals. Charles led with his flashlight, scanning each corner. "Someone's been here recently. Coffee's still warm." Another officer called out, "There's a safe in the basement." They broke it open. Inside were over 30 handwritten notebooks, thousands of pages documenting psychological experiments. Photos of each child from Class 3A were carefully pasted beside notes like, "Subject number 16, negative response when deprived of doll. Subject number 7, obedience increased under low-frequency lullaby." Charles shook with rage. He treated them like lab rats. Suddenly, a noise. A figure bolted from the back door, a tall, Thin man with long silver hair, face masked with a surgical covering. "There he is!" Charles shouted. The man pulled a small blade, lunging at Charles, who dodged. Two other officers tackled him to the ground. The mask slipped off, revealing Frederick Ross. Though aged, his skin remained unnaturally taut, the result of years of hormone use. "You don't understand. I was only trying to perfect humanity," he hissed. "They're alive, aren't they? They're happy." Charles stomped on his hand, pinning him down. "Happy? Decades of imprisonment, injections, lost childhoods, that's your idea of happiness?" Frederick laughed maniacally. "They still call me Mr. Raymond. Children need discipline." 2 days later, at the United States Supreme Court, Frederick Ross was charged with 87 counts, including kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, child abuse, identity fraud, neurological manipulation, and illegal medical practice. The trial drew nationwide attention. Cameras broadcast the moment Catherine entered the courthouse holding Ellen's hand, both in white dresses, eyes resolute. In her testimony, Catherine said, "He may have caged my daughter's body, but he never killed a mother's love. And I will fight to reclaim every day he stole from us." Ellen, voice shaking but clear, said, "He used to look into my eyes and say, 'Your mother's gone. No one is coming for you.' But when Mom held my hand in the hospital, I knew he was lying." The courtroom fell silent. 1 month later, the final sentence was delivered. Defendant Frederick Ross is hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, in permanent solitary confinement. Catherine clutched Ellen's hand, overcome with emotion. Charles placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his eyes finally at peace. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. "Ms. Mason, how do you feel?" For the first time in nearly 30 years, Catherine smiled. "I just want to go home. With my daughter. And hang up the class photo, this time, with no blurred faces." 3 months later, St. Michael's School in Willow Creek was fully demolished. In its place, the townspeople built a memorial garden. At the center stood a white stone statue of 23 children holding hands, reaching toward the sun. Catherine and Ellen stood among the flowers. Ellen had begun healing, learning to write again, drawing, listening to music with her mother. "Mom," Ellen said softly, "I miss my pink hair clip." Catherine pulled the cleaned, restored clip from her coat and placed it gently in her daughter's hand. "Keep it. It's proof you made it through the dark, and found the light." That night, in their small house in Willow Creek, Catherine and Ellen sat on the sofa, candlelight flickering. The TV murmured the day's final broadcast. The Springfield case continues to shake North America. The United Nations issued a formal condemnation of unlawful juvenile captivity and is pushing for global audits of educational personnel systems. Catherine turned off the TV. "That's enough. We don't need to hear any more." Ellen nodded and rested her head on her mother's shoulder. "What can I call myself now?" the girl asked softly. Catherine kissed her forehead. "Ellen Mason. Citizen of freedom." And then, in a village once forgotten, the sound of children's laughter echoed again beneath the morning sun. A mother's love is a force nothing can extinguish, not time, not darkness, not evil. Catherine's story proves that when a mother believes, loves, and never gives up, the truth will come to light. Mocked, rejected, and isolated, she kept walking, and that unwavering belief saved 23 lives. Sometimes, justice does not begin with power, but with the courage of one ordinary person who dares to defy fear and silence.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.